Hello, I'm Frank Koelzow. This is number 0690, the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuff File program, number 0690. And coming up on this edition of the Stuff File program, we have a return visit from Natasha Deen, author of the Spooky Sleuths Series, YA books that share ghost stories from Guyana.
It's like X-Files meets Stranger Things with a Caribbean twist. Our mermaids are not like the regular kinds of mermaids. We call them mermaids. They can actually come onto land. You can tell that they are not human because one hoof is like a deer's foot. And same thing with like some of our witches. They could turn themselves into like dust or powder and slide in through keyholes. That's what the series does. It introduces readers, young and old, to monsters they maybe don't know about.
Josh Nalley, aka TikTok's Living Dead Josh, who has done over 300 videos where he portrays a dead body. How did this all start, and how has he progressed over 300 videos?
It came out of boredom, just trying to figure out something to do on my free time and trying to, chase that 15 minutes of fame that everybody chases. The first one was me in a creek with my dogs, like me just propping my phone up against a rock and me laying there and trying to hold my breath. The 300 one, a little bit more, I've started using a little bit more equipment. Sometimes I bring my friends in to help me. I don't know if you'd say more elaborate, more cognizance of where I'm laying and the background.
Legendary Montreal broadcaster Marc Denis, author of May We Tell You Some Stories. It chronicles just some of the hundreds of celebrity interviews he's done over the years. How did this all start for him?
It really intensified my interviewing when I became host, producer, and supplier of an in-flight audio program on the wings of Air Canada. I had that show called Coffee, Tea, or Pop /Aéropop because it was bilingual. I hosted that for a good 10 years, and that was the key that opened all the doors to all the artists and their publicists and their agents. So that went on for many, many years, and I was able to acquire over 200 interviews with famous people.
And there's lots and lots of Stuff File news, and of course, an idiot of the day. The guest slater, the person who told you this was show number 0690, was Frank Koelzow, an old high school best friend of mine who is currently the managing director of an IT company in Hong Kong. Thank you very much, Frank, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuff File program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. Did you have a good Halloween last week? Well, trick-or-treating was off limits in a suburban Detroit neighborhood. There's nothing sweet about bringing home a cockroach.
The eggs are very easy to pick up on your shoes, on your pants, on your clothes, and they could spread like wildfire.
That's Tom Vargo, who lives across the street from a house in Wyandotte, Michigan.
They have never seen anything quite so bad. The roaches were all over the floors in broad daylight, on the furniture, on the kitchen table.
At a city council meeting, another neighbor, Pat Webster, shared her thoughts on the creepy crawlies.
They're just breeding their little hearts out, 2.5 months, and they like to come and visit, and, we don't want them.
Speaking of city council, officials in Wyandotte said a cockroach infestation was confirmed at a vacant home after a tip from a trash hauler. The pests have been moving to other homes. Sidewalks were closed off on Halloween night on a portion of 20th Street, said City Council member Todd Hanna.
We shouldn't have anybody walking down that street. We've got a 1 to 2 block problem now, and then if we don't close it down, we could have a 20 block problem.
Officials didn't want the bugs hitching a ride on costumes. The city is trying to exterminate the roaches, but it will take some time. I guess we're way past the Raid bug spray point, aren't we?
Wanna slay 'em? Spray 'em with Raid Ant and Roach Spray. Kills on contact, kills for weeks. Raid kills bugs dead.
Belated Happy Halloween. By the way, would you rather have roaches or ghosts? Linda Hill, owner of a rental home in Gainesville, Texas, has ghosts. Many ghosts. Way back when, the house used to be a bordello, and I guess some of the employees, and I'm doing air quotes now, seem to have a difficult time moving on. Said Linda.
Well, we've got all kinds of ghosts. We've got kids, and we've got old people, old guys, and we've got hookers, the hookers of Hill House Manor.
The hookers are the most common visitors, known to stroke a male renter's face or their arm or touch them on the shoulder, but so far, no monetary transactions have taken place because, they're ghosts.
They try to stir up business, but they can't figure out a way to conclude the transaction, so nothing ever happens.
Wow. Talk about ethereal interruptus. Meanwhile, the Oklahoma Highway Patrol arrested 30-year-old Dustin Slocum for how he arrived in the state. They say Slocum jumped on the back rail of a semi-trailer, leaving a shipping yard in Wichita, Kansas, arriving in Guthrie, Oklahoma, 130 miles away at 2:30 a.m. He was charged with public intoxication and joyriding. Reporters found one of Slocum's friends to talk to, his former landlord, Shane King, who has known him for a decade. Said King about hearing about the caper, "Yep, that's him. That's the kind of stuff he would do." How was he as a tenant? Nothing but trouble, King said. When troopers asked Slocum why he rode the back of the truck so late at night, he replied he was hoping to find his wife. I have to admire the fortitude of someone who can hang on to the back of a semi-trailer, clinging to it for 130 miles while intoxicated. That's some serious core and upper arm strength. Most of us would have been roadkill by at least the halfway mark. Also, if a guy can do that, I'm guessing that his missing wife definitely doesn't want to be found. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, what's in a name? Well, let me share a story with you. Police in Jacksonville, Florida, responded to a report of someone trying to break into a residence. When officers arrived at around 11 p.m., they were ambushed by the prowler, who fired multiple shots at them, hitting one officer in the back. The officer was saved by his body armor, but the suspect was able to escape despite officers returning fire. The man stole a car from the home and led a 20-mile chase to the Dames Point Bridge, where he jumped out and went over the rail, falling 175 feet into the St. Johns River. Officers could see him swimming in the water, but he went under. Divers found his body at around 3 a.m. The 37-year-old man, who had one previous arrest, was identified as Charlie Brown.
Good grief.
Wow. What are the odds?
You blockhead!
I mean, clearly, this was not a good man.
You're a good man, Charlie Brown, and we know you will go very far.
Nope, not even close. Well, he did go very far, 175 feet over the rail, but eventually he was caught, or at least his body was found.
He's a clown, that Charlie Brown. He's gonna get caught, just you wait and see.
Why is everybody always picking on me?
Anyway, let's get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? It was back in June that we last had author Natasha Deen on the show. Back then, we talked about her YA novel, The Signs and Wonders of Tuna Rashad. Well, she's back. Partly because she was so much fun the last time she was on, and also because, since Halloween just passed, I thought it might be cool to talk about the Spooky Sleuths Series. Now, Natasha joins us via Zoom from Edmonton. Hi, Natasha.
Hello, Peter. Hello, listeners. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, or like, I guess letting me join you.
Yes.
I'm thrilled to be here.
Thanks for being on the program with us once again. When we spoke to you last time, we talked a little bit about your background from Guyana originally. And these are Guyanese spooky stories or ghost stories. Are Guyanese ghost stories different from what we consider traditional ghost stories here?
Yeah, well, certainly the monsters are different, right? And I'm so delighted with this series because it's like X-Files meets Stranger Things with a Caribbean twist. And so, yeah, like our mermaids are not like the regular kinds of mermaids. We call them mermaids. They can actually come onto land. When they come onto land, you can tell that they are not human because one hoof is like a deer's foot. And same thing with like some of our witches, right? That they could turn themselves into like dust or powder and slide in through keyholes. And so that's what the series does. It introduces readers, young and old, to monsters they maybe don't know about, and monsters that perhaps they do know, but they're going to know in a really different way because it's the Caribbean take, it's the Guyanese take on these creatures.
What made you decide that you wanted to create these stories for young readers and bring them into the Guyanese ghost stories world?
Well, because I grew up with X-Files, and I love X-Files, and I love Stranger Things, and Goosebumps too, right? Like all of those kind of spooky, spine-tingling kinds of stories. And I wanted the chance to bring that to specifically with this audience, like six to 12, right? It's a transitional series, but I wanted to do it in a way where the answer is never given. So we have our two characters. We've got Awesome, who is Guyanese, has grown up on these stories. He has just moved to Lionsgate, which is in Washington State. He's absolutely convinced that there are supernatural creatures roaming the town looking to take over. On the other side is his best friend, Awesome, or Rockshar, sorry, and she is really science based. So she's like, no, I think this is just an experiment gone wild. And so Lionsgate is a research town. Like everybody there are all scientists and they're working on, cool projects. And so every story has a monster, and both of the kids and their friends, they come about it in really different ways. But at the end of it, so just like Awesome and Rockshar, our readers get all the same information. And just like the kids in the story, at the end of the book, readers get to decide for themselves. And I just love that. I love the idea because this is true to life, right? We all get this information, but how we make conclusions is very different. So it's spooky with the scientific method, which just delights my nerdy little heart. So yeah.
Well, since
that's what inspired me, Peter. I'm a nerd and I love it.
since the readers get to almost decide what's what at the end of the book, have you received notices from readers with thinking about ideas as to where the story is going, and in a way that you never anticipated?
No, but I have. But the thing I love is that I get feedback from readers saying they couldn't predict, they couldn't quite guess what was going to happen in the end. Like they could follow and they knew, and they were, and I love that, especially with spooky stories, right? You don't want everything to be where, as a reader, you're like, well, this thing's going to happen, and then it does. So as a writer, I was really delighted that I kept my readers on their toes.
How many books are in the series?
There are 4 books in the series, and 2 of them are out right now. So there's book number 1, which is The Ghost Tree, which is a creepy tree in the deserted cemetery that seems to be growing at an alarming rate. And it seems also to have power to take over the adults in the town. And so that's book 1. And then book 2 is Beware the Moonlight, where Awesome and his friends have this student teacher who comes in to teach them about the moon, but something seems very, very off with Mr. Man. And so they have to get to the bottom of it. And then the other two books are going to come out in 2023. And they're going to be like the Fair Maids and the Witches. So I'm quite excited about those.
I got to tell you, you would have lost me as a kid because creepy trees really creep me out.
Well, see, but this is like, I grew up in Guyana the first 5 years of my life, right? And as a kid, Guyana is so amazing. It's so wild, right? Like here in Canada, you're playing and then people tell you, okay, get off, get off the street. There's a car coming. And in Guyana, you go outside to play. And my grandfather would say, no, you can't. And oh, why can't I go outside? And he's like, well, because the anacondas are in the sugarcane fields. And that was totally acceptable and normal that there are these giant boa constrictors that wander about. And then as a kid, you grow up with these stories, right? Like there's a bridge where between like midnight and sunrise, you're not supposed to go near the bridge because the philosophy or the idea is that at midnight till kind of sunrise, the bridge and the waters now belong to the water spirits. And if you come up, they will get angry with you and they will like take you down. And same thing with the tree. There's actually a tree in Guyana, which, the Dutch elm trees is what inspired the story. There's a tree, Peter, in Guyana where they think like that it was inhabited by ghosts. They've tried to cut down the tree. Anybody that tried to cut down this tree or take out this tree, something terrible happened to them because the government was trying to take out the tree to build a road. And it got a point where, and I can't remember which prime minister was, but basically there's a decree that no one is supposed to touch this tree. And they just built the roads around the tree because it was just, so yeah, I agree with you. I do not go out at night. I'm very respectful of trees and water and anything that goes sort of like bump in the night, keep my feet up. You don't let your feet dangle all over the bed after a certain time, right? So yeah, but it's a lot more fun when you get to write it because you're in control of the monsters.
I have a West Indian background as well, and grandmothers, West Indian grandmothers, I think by tradition are very religious, and also mine was a practical joker. So the combination of religion and practical joking and telling stories, you can just imagine the things she told me when I was a child, and then she'd have the nerve to say night night. It's like, really? There's no sleeping happening tonight. When you first started writing these books, the Spooky Sleuths stories, did you envision them as being a series of books, or was it a one-off that just got carried away?
I love the idea of the series. And so this is kind of an interesting thing for my fellow writers who are out there listening. So a lot of times when we're pitching books to agents or editors, what we say is, this book is a standalone, however, it can be turned into a series. And so the first book was written, and Penguin Random House Young Readers, who's the publisher, they loved the idea and they loved the book, and they were like, hey, can you give us more? And I was just like, yes, absolutely. I would be delighted because there are so many monsters for me to introduce you to. So that's how the 4 books came about.
These stories are for everyone in the age group that they're intended for, but do you find that there's a particular interest in people who come from the West Indies or come from Guyana who want their kids to read this because it kind of touches on the lore that they may have grown up with?
Yeah. I think there's a special kind of delight for all of us when we see our culture represented or our experiences represented. So yeah, certainly I think for Caribbean folks and Guyanese folk, there's an extra special delight. And then for non-Caribbean people, like I said, it's a delight for them to be able to learn about these monsters that they don't know, and to get a sense of Caribbean culture through the monsters.
Yeah, it's a whole new series and sense of fears, isn't it?
Really? Yes. Good night. Sweet dreams. You're welcome. Right?
The book series is called the Spooky Sleuth Series. And what are the individual titles of the book? The first one is the Ghost Tree, you said.
The Ghost Tree, and then there is Beware the Moonlight. And I believe book 3 is Don't Go in the Water. And then book 4 is Fire in the Sky.
Okay, you've crossed off all my fears. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Peter. Sweet dreams, okay? Yeah.
The Spooky Sleuths Series, written by Natasha Deen. Natasha, thank you once again for being on the program with us.
Thank you so much, Peter. Have a day, everyone.
Natasha Deen, author of the Spooky Sleuths Series. You can go to my website at thestuffile.com to the page for this show, which is show number 0690, and you'll find the link to Natasha's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order her books directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, a show that is heard on many a fine radio station, including World FM in New Zealand, that's 88.2 FM.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like. But the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/thestufffileprogram. program.
Malik here. Now that I finally started school, I fully understand what a rat race society can be. Boy, it was much easier just being a kid. Anyway, I now know that it's even more important to be able to unwind with a fun show with my uncle Peter Anthony Holder. So sit back and relax, but don't relax too much so that your body turns to the consistency of mercury. If it did, that would be dangerous if you're driving. Here's Peter.
And still to come on the program, we'll touch base with Living Dead Josh. And we'll also have a chat with Marc Denis, author of May We Tell You Some Stories. We have an Idiot of the Day coming your way a little later on, plus more Stuff File news right here, right now. Well, we all know that the Washington Commanders football team has been a dumpster fire of an organization for years now, but this is the next level. A man who won $14,000 in a 50-50 raffle run by the NFL team said the check he received bounced. A team spokesperson said, "We've reached out to the fan and sent an electronic payment directly to his account. It was a bank error, and we have reached out to the bank to determine what happened and to ensure it doesn't happen again." Meanwhile, as you may know, team owner Daniel Snyder has had a lot of allegations sent his way, and even some fellow NFL owners have gone on record indicating that they'd like to see him ousted. I won't go through the sordid details of all the problems that have plagued that franchise during Snyder's tenure, but I will delve into their long-winded name change situation, which took forever to go from the Washington Redskins to the Washington football team to the Washington Commanders. And now that they're officially the Commanders, there really isn't any reason to change all of the words to their official fight song. Just a few selected ones.
Hail to the Commanders, hail victory. Leaders on a mission, fight for old DC. Runner, passer, score, we want a lot more. Beat 'em, swamp 'em, touchdown, let the points soar. Fight on, till you have won all of Washington. Rah, 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 hail to the Commanders, hail victory. Leaders on a mission, fight for old DC.
Wow. Weren't protesters singing this on January the 6th? Yeah. Anyway, speaking of rich people behaving badly, well, it's been a couple of weeks since Elon Musk, the self-described chief twit, overpaid for Twitter to the tune of $44 billion. That price tag is being hailed as one of the most overpaid tech acquisitions in history. The actual value of Twitter at the time of the purchase was believed to be around $25 billion, and now that he owns it, he has to deal with the $3 million that Twitter is losing each and every day. A week after he bought it, he fired half the employees and now is being sued in a class action suit for mass layoffs without proper notice. His erratic behavior and equally erratic tweets has led to advertisers fleeing like rats leaving a sinking ship, which only leads him to lash out at the advertisers fleeing like rats leaving from a sinking ship. Things at Twitter are going from bad to worse, but I can't help but think of the previous board members of the company who made out like bandits on the company's value. The deal officially went through late Thursday, October 27th, which means those heaping, hunking checks went out the door on Friday. Imagine their delight.
Just got paid this Friday night. Party hot to the place is right. Feeling alright. Shake it all around, baby. One drink, now I'm getting down.
And finally, before we get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, it's time for another episode of It Happened at Walmart.
You can always count on certain things, and Walmart's one of those.
A Texas woman was arrested after she threatened to shoot a man with a BB gun because she didn't want to go to Walmart. Oh, we've all been there, dear. We've all been there. 17-year-old Heaven Valenzuela was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, family violence, abandoning or endangering a child, and possession of marijuana. Police received a call from a witness stating that a man and woman were arguing at the store. The witness told police the woman had a gun and that they both left in a gold van. After police found the van and conducted a traffic stop, 20-year-old Edgar Omar Salazar told an officer that he wanted to go to Walmart, but Valenzuela refused. Salazar got out of the van and started to walk to the store when Valenzuela approached him with the BB gun and told him she was going to shoot him. Salazar told police he took the gun away and they both returned to the vehicle, which was occupied by another man and 3 children. Officers found a bag of marijuana in the vehicle which Salazar claimed to have owned. Salazar was arrested on charges of possession of marijuana. Both Valenzuela and Salazar were taken into custody. Yes, Walmart can sometimes bring the worst out in people, which is why we often feature It Happened at Walmart.
You can always count on certain things, and Walmart's one of those.
And let's get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff All program, shall we? Josh Nalley is a man who has posed as a dead body on TikTok well over 300 times. Known as Living Dead Josh, this most interesting hobby has garnered a decent following and even caught the eye of producers at the TV series CSI Vegas. While Josh hasn't reached the point where he can make a living playing dead, he has received a fair amount of attention. Josh joins us via Zoom from Kentucky. Hi, Josh.
Hello. How are you?
Just tickety-boo. Thanks very much for being on the program with us. So I had a chance to see a lot of pictures of you acting dead, but I've also seen you in makeup on CSI. So again, kudos for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
How did this all come about with the hobby of being Living Dead Josh?
It came out of boredom, just trying to figure out something to do on my free time and trying to, chase that 15 minutes of fame that everybody chases.
You've done it over 300 times. Have the scenarios that you put on TikTok, have they become more elaborate as time goes on? What was your first one like, and what was your 300th like?
The first one was me in a creek with my dogs, like me just propping my phone up against a rock and me laying there and trying to hold my breath. The 300th one, I've started using a little bit more equipment. Sometimes I bring my friends in to help me. I don't know if you'd say more elaborate, more cognizant of where I'm laying and the background.
Speaking of friends and family, what do you friends and family think of this hobby? What do they think when they started, and when you started rather, and what do they think now that there's a certain amount of fame and notoriety from this?
The support has been amazing from my friends and family. That they love it. They didn't really know when I first started. It wasn't until like the first one that went viral, which was Thanksgiving last year, that they knew about it. And then even then, I didn't really tell them. It was their kids that was telling them that it was going viral. But the support has been overwhelming. A lot of them have helped me out on videos, or we joke about it when we get together too.
What was the reaction and what was your internal feeling when you first went viral with this? I mean, first of all, did you anticipate that this would happen? And if not, what was that feeling like when you realized a lot of people are looking at these?
It was a bit of disbelief. I think in the first day, that first one that went viral, I think it did 1 million views. So there's a lot of, a little bit of disbelief there and some elation. Like I said, I didn't really tell anybody because it was one of those things that I was just keeping to myself at the time. But yeah, it is a real elation that people were connecting with it.
Well, you said it started out of boredom, but beyond that fact, I mean, what made you decide that playing dead was the way to put boredom aside?
Well, I figured it was probably the easiest way I could get onto a movie or TV show without actually having to do much work, or at least I thought at the time. It's been a lot of work. I didn't see anybody else doing it on TikTok. I figured it was a niche that I could fill.
So in other words, your goal was to get into movies or television in some way, shape, or form, and you thought this was your in?
I thought so, yeah, and it worked. So I filled that niche.
I've had a chance to look at a lot of your pictures, lying on your back, lying on your stomach, eyes closed, eyes open. How difficult is it for you to keep your eyes open long enough to play dead?
That's not very hard. I'm pretty good at winning a staring contest, so that part's easy. It's the holding the breath that gets a little bit difficult sometimes, or laying in uncomfortable spots where like rocks are jabbing you in your side that gets hard.
I also noticed that, like me, you're a pretty big boy.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, is it a little more difficult to suppress your breathing so that your stomach doesn't move? I mean, have you mastered this act?
I'd like to think so. I mean, early on, I've gone back and looked at earlier TikToks and I've caught myself breathing, but the later ones, I think they're a lot better where you don't see any movement.
As I mentioned, you've got the attention of the folks from CSI Vegas. How did they reach out to you?
They reached out to me. They commented on one of my TikToks. I guess I kept on showing up on their For You page, and they had commented on one of my TikToks. And then a couple days later, they emailed me and asked me if I'd be interested in playing a dead body on CSI Vegas.
And the episode of CSI Vegas, which is the first week of November, what was it like shooting your scenes?
It was interesting. I was in makeup for about 2 hours. They put a full chest piece on me to make it look like I had gone through an autopsy. We actually were filming my scene for about 5 hours with me laying on a metal gurney in a body bag. It was a fun time because all the actors, they were super nice. And the director, Mario Van Peebles, he was super nice. The whole crew was just very accommodating and like kept on checking on me and everything.
And since this is something you've done only once as far as for film and television is concerned, I mean, there are people out there who make a career out of being a dead body. Did you have any pointers from cast and crew, particularly the director, as to how you were doing on your first time out like this?
You know, they the only really direction they gave me is like right before they called action, they would make sure that I took a deep breath.
And now that you've done CSI Vegas, what's next on the horizon for you?
I don't know, maybe another TV show or a movie, hopefully.
What kind of attention have you been getting? Because, I mean, I found a piece on you online. I've seen many news stories. You were on CNN. How has the attention been for you for what you've done?
It's been almost a little bit overwhelming. Like you said, CNN, the New York Post. I think talked to people in Australia and New Zealand and England. Yeah, so it's been a bit overwhelming, but welcomed.
Now, I understand that the folks at CSI Vegas didn't necessarily pay you for being a corpse. Did they at least fly you out, put you up, that kind of thing?
They did. They flew me out and paid for my flight and my hotel. And we went around Los Angeles and filmed TikToks for my channel. So I got to experience Los Angeles for the first time.
So now that you've had your day on the screen, are you getting an agent?
I don't think so. I don't think I need an agent just yet. I don't have enough calls coming in for that.
Are you getting any calls?
Not yet. Maybe they want to see my work first.
At the time that we're recording this, the show has not aired yet. By the time we air this program, the show will have aired. Are you having a big party to gather friends and family around to watch you on a slab?
Not a huge party. A couple close friends and a couple of my coworkers and stuff, because we're doing it at my work after we close that night. So not a huge party. It's probably maybe 15, 20 people.
Has the experience of doing this, will it enhance your future TikTok videos? I'm assuming you're going to continue doing more.
I plan on continue doing them. I don't know if it'll enhance. Like I don't plan to start doing my own makeup and everything. Maybe bring back a little bit of the gore that I kind of slowed down on in the early ones that I used to do.
In the over 300 that you've done, what's the easiest one to play dead in? What's the most difficult one to play dead in?
Oh, the easiest one to play dead in probably was I played dead in a hotel bed. So that was fairly easy. That, or I played dead in a bathtub with a shower curtain in front of me and only my arm hanging out. So I could actually breathe in that one. So most difficult one, I was chained up by my wrist at one point. So I was suspended by my wrist for a few minutes while I was recording. That one was kind of difficult and painful.
Also, I've seen others where you have your dogs walking around you. Are your dogs in the gig? I mean, do they understand what you're doing isn't real? And if they lick you, does it become a problem? Do you try to avoid those kind of movements or keep the dogs a certain distance away from you?
No, I like them in there. They have ruined a couple takes before, but I like them in there because it adds a little bit of realness, because with my little foxhound, she always has a sad expression on her face, so I think it sells it well. Plus, they're always around, so if I'm filming in my own yard, then they're going to be there, especially if I'm laying on the ground, because they're like, oh, let's go see what he's up to.
While you were on the set of CSI, did it give you any opportunity, or were you allowed to have the opportunity to do another TikTok?
We did a couple on the set, yes.
One of my favorites is, I guess when you went to L.A., you were lying in front of the star of Marg Helkenberger?
Yes.
I understand it was a little hot on the sidewalk.
I mean, it's a black sidewalk in the middle of summer of July, so it was starting to burn my leg a little bit. I mean, nothing too bad, but I think we got it done right in the right amount of time for me to get back up and not have more than just a heat rash there.
And while you were doing it, because that's a pretty busy place, what were people saying or doing while you were lying there on her star or next to her star?
Luckily, I had two ladies helping me out, so they kind of acted as crowd control. But also, I don't think many people noticed or paid attention or cared that I was doing anything. They just kind of walk past you and not really pay attention to you.
A big guy lying on Marg Helgenberger's star and nobody pays any attention. What does that say about society?
Exactly.
And also, that is not the cleanest sidewalk in the world.
No, it's not. That's why I didn't go face down on it. Also, they had asked me to bring a towel, and I was in LA and a little bit scatterbrained at that time, so I forgot to bring a towel. Plus, I don't think too many people die on a towel, but, I did it for the TikTok.
Well, congratulations on an absolutely unique hobby, and congratulations on being on CSI.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being on the program with us, Josh.
Thank you for having me.
Josh Nalley, a.k.a. Living Dead Josh. You can go to my website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0690, and you'll find the links to Josh's TikTok page. Those of you who didn't see his corpse debut on CSI Vegas, which was on November 3rd's episode entitled There's the Rub, you can probably catch it on demand. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, a show that is heard on many a fine radio station, including KDX 1670 AM and 89.5 FM in Illinois.
Portions of the Stuff File program are available to you via Audia.io. At Audia, you'll find hundreds and hundreds of Stuff File program interviews going all the way back to 2009. That's Audia, AUDEA.io. There's more Stuff File program coming your way right after this break.
Here's a brief word about our show and my book. If you become a regular Patreon patron of the Stuff File program, I'll give you an e-version of my book, Great Conversations, my interviews with 2 men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. It's easy to do. Just go to patreon.com and become a patron to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. So, join Patreon and claim your copy of Great Conversations, my interviews with 2 men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. Sign up at patreon.com/The Stuff File program.
Coming to you from the outskirts of sanity, this is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
And still to come, we'll talk to Marc Denis, author of May We Tell You Some Stories. We also have an Idiot of the Day coming your way a little later on, and a few more Stuff File news stories, like the one right here, right now. A man stealing stored wire high up on a power stanchion in Plainfield Township, Pennsylvania, suffered a severe shock and burns when a live wire arced through him, throwing him from his perch about 50 feet up. The man had secured himself to the tower, so he dropped 20 or 30 feet, then swung and struck the structure before hanging in the air until his screams were heard by hunters. It's not clear how long the man had been up there before being found. Once a power company shut off electricity to the line, firefighters were able to bring the man down with their ladder truck. The unnamed man, who was in his 40s, was badly burned as the electricity surged through him, and authorities were surprised he survived. The man was talking on his way to the ambulance. He claimed he was deer spotting, not stealing, but authorities believe that he was after the wire that is stored on the tower in case work needs to be done on existing lines. It was the second tower the man had allegedly hit. He had insulated tools with him, and those were recovered by police. Criminal charges will be filed against the man. And if convicted, once he goes to jail, he will probably have to live down the nickname of Sparky. Anyway, let's get to our next guest here on this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Legendary Montreal broadcaster Marc Denis has spent a lifetime behind the microphone, and it has given him a front row seat to encounters with, as he puts it, dozens of famous faces in notable places. He shares a lot of the stories in his new book, May We Tell You Some Stories. Marc joins us via Zoom from right here in Montreal. Hi, Marc.
Greetings, Peter. Comment ça va, là?
Ça va bien, vous?
Excellent. Thank you for having me into this fabulous stuff program that you got going here.
It's a pleasure to have you on. I mean, we're not that different in age, but you're a little older than me. So I remember as a teenager being a huge fan of you back in the CKGM days. I actually went to a cyclothon just to see you. You were there. Again, is one of the things you did in radio, as most of us did. We did a lot of public appearances, and you were in Côte St. Luc in a cyclothon, and you had that, dare I say, we'll call it nowadays, a porn mustache. And
thank you for remembering that, Fred.
Yeah, and the Adidas tracksuit on your bike, and I'm thinking, that's what I want to be when I get older.
I actually, Peter, I remember that. That was I was wearing my Connexion Française outfit with the effigy of Mais Oui, the radio gangster on the back of it. Oh boy, there were good times, great times, and it was for a great cause.
Well, speaking of good times, let's talk about your book, May We Tell You Some Stories.
Let's.
It's very similar, actually, to the book that I wrote several years ago, which is Great Conversations. You can't help but, when being in a business like this, coming across, as you say, the famous faces in notable places. So what are some of the people you talked to, and what was a big thrill for you in doing not only the interviews themselves, but recollecting the situation with this book?
Well, it all started with, it really intensified my interviewing when I became host, producer, and supplier of an in-flight audio program on the wings of Air Canada. I had that show called Coffee, Tea, or Pop / Aeropop. because it was bilingual. I hosted that for a good 10 years, and that was my key, the key that opened all the doors to all the artists and their publicists and their agents. I would simply say, hi, this is Marc Denis from In-Flight Audio, Air Canada. I'd like to interview so-and-so. You know, they'd immediately say, yes, we can do that. He's playing or she's playing Montreal in 3 weeks. We'll arrange a meeting for you. So that went on for many, many years, and I was able to gather over 200 interviews plus with famous people in notable places, and use the clips not just for specials for them, showcasing their music and their songwriting for the passengers up above at 35,000 feet, but also used many of the clips on my radio shows in Montreal, in Toronto. I spent 5 years on the air in Toronto in the late 1990s, as well as in the Ottawa-Gatineau area throughout my career. So it's been well worn, and they were well used throughout to enhance my programs, my shows, and entertain the audience with more than just the music. There was the artist with me at any moment on the air.
You know, people always ask me what my favorite celebrity interview was, so I get to turn that around and ask you that very question.
Well, out of the 200 plus, I could probably draw you up a short list of five, a top five. Number 5 would be Rick Astley. You know, the tiny, slim, nerdy guy with the big with the big booming singing voice. They're gonna lift you up, gonna let you down.
Everybody's Rick-rolling these days.
Exactly. Big booming voice, big baritone voice, but kind of a nerdy, slim, tiny, soft-spoken fella. So insightful, quick-witted, just a pleasure to interview. Number 4 would be the late, great Paul Revere, of Paul Revere and the Raiders fame, the great 60s and early 70s American rock band. Interviewed him in Reno, Nevada, at his club Kicks, name of the first big Paul Revere and Raiders hit. One of the funny guys of rock and roll, incredibly goofy, led the band Paul Revere and the Raiders right up until his passing in 2014. He is just a joy to interview. Rest in peace, Mr. Revere. Number 3, Gloria Estefan. Absolutely delightful. Met her and chatted with her twice in the 80s, 3 years apart, and she remembered me. The first time I interviewed her was in Florida, in Miami, and 3 years later I interviewed her here in Montreal, and she remembered me, her and her husband Emilio, together since 1975. One of the great love stories, Peter, and one of the great Latin success stories worldwide. She's just sweet and absolutely real. And number 2, Boy George. I was one of only a couple of interview people that was granted a meeting with the man back in the mid-'80s. Eloquent, well-spoken, and surprisingly big person.
Yes, he is.
I'm 6'2", and I think he's 6'2" in some.
Yep.
And it was quite revealing and quite the coup to be able to get the interview back then. Number one, I would say we'll go to Canada for this one. Burton Cummings. Over a 30-year period, Peter, our interview paths crossed 4 times. He's a Canadian musical icon and national treasure. Compelling stories. He's a remarkable storyteller. He's got memory for places, people, events from way back. Really interesting hobbies. He's a sports cards collector, a sports car collector. And he's still on the road performing all those classic tunes of his solo and of the Guess Who repertoire all these decades later. He'd be number 1.
It's interesting that, like myself, although I spent a shorter period of time doing this than you did, we both started in music radio. We both started as radio jocks, as the saying goes, or DJs. I gravitated toward talk radio and news. So when little Marc Denis was growing up, did you ever think you'd have the opportunity not only to talk to musicians like you did, but also other people from various walks of life in interview form? Because it certainly wasn't something I expected I'd be doing when I first decided that I wanted to be in radio.
Well, throughout my career, I've not only done radio, but I've also done some television hosting in both English and French in Montreal and in Toronto. And throughout, I've interviewed or rubbed shoulders with actors, and I had some bit parts in some cameos in some Hollywood movies that were filmed in Montreal throughout the 80s and 90s and so on, and had the pleasure of rubbing shoulders with Jack Lemmon, Eartha Kitt, Rod Steiger, many people in the film industry. So yeah, there's the palette is rather large when you're at this for over 50 years of doing this.
We've got about a minute to go, but I've got to mention a very important part of your book, and that is where part of the proceeds will be going. So can you tell us about Teresa Delaire Palliative Care Residence and what it means to you and how they're going to benefit from May We Tell You Some Stories?
Well, let me briefly mention to you that we've had a difficult year in our family here. I lost my father-in-law, my father, and my mother all this past spring, one after the other. And the writing of this book in English and in French was kind of my escape to get away from all the grief and sadness, and recollecting and remembering these stories kind of brought some joy to my heart in this very difficult year. All this to say that I decided to remit partial proceeds of my sales to the Teresa Delaire Palliative Care Residence. They took in my father-in-law for his final days earlier this year so that he could conclude his life in dignity, comfort, and love, surrounded by love. This is our way of giving back. My wife, Sandy, was for a long time, 17 years, she was a volunteer handling the pharmacy at the palliative care residence. And my son, Paul, worked in maintenance half a dozen years. And my sister-in-law, Gail, and her husband, Russ, were instrumental in the creation with Teresa Delaire, the late Teresa Delaire, now, way back in 2002, of creating that residence, which is a vital part of the community in the West Island of Montreal.
It's a pleasure to have you on the program to talk to you. The book is called May We Tell You Some Stories. I know that as you've just mentioned, you've had a fair amount of tragedy in your life of recent with some loss, but you also had a gain. You have a new grandson, right?
You knew grandson, like little Isaac Mais Oui Denis. He brought some a ray of light through the clouds this year of 2022, and it's the cycle of life that is going on. And I'd like to mention that the book, or the books, because May We Tell You Some Stories is the English version. The French version is called On Jase, Mais Oui, and both are available at my publisher, which is flowerpublish.com. Available Amazon and in bookstores such as Indigo and others as of the second week of November.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Marc, for taking the time to be on the program with us.
May we thank you. Rock on, Peter.
Marc Mais Oui Denis, legendary broadcaster and author of May We Tell You Some Stories. You can go to my website at thestuffwile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0690, and you'll find links to Marc's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder. And we have one more Stuff File news story to share with you before we get to, the idiot of the day. A dispute over possession of a sex toy turned violent and resulted in the arrest of a Florida woman for battering her boyfriend. Responding to a domestic violence situation at a home in Fort Pierce, cops interviewed the male victim, who said that he and 34-year-old Chelsea White were having a verbal argument over a handbag and a sex toy that he owned. According to the police report, as the argument progressed, the victim asked White to return the sex toy to him because he owned it. However, White refused to give the sex toy back to the victim. The adult item is not further described in an arrest affidavit. Unable to secure the return of his sex toy, the 33-year-old victim picked up White's handbag and declared, "I have your bag, give me back my property." A struggle for control of the handbag followed, with White allegedly kicking and biting the man. The victim, cops say, punched White to make her stop biting him. After investigators concluded that White was the primary aggressor during the battle in the couple's residence, she was arrested for domestic battery and booked into the St. Lucie County Jail on a misdemeanor count. All over a sex toy. You see, this is what happens very early in life when children aren't taught to share their toys. And speaking of which, in a strikingly similar story, it's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. This Stuff File presents the Idiot of the Day.
A Kentucky woman who stabbed her male cousin during a dispute over a borrowed sex toy has been sentenced to 12 months behind bars. It must be theme night. And yes, I know we can debate why a Kentucky woman even gets into a position of being in a dispute over a borrowed sex toy with her male cousin, but that's an anthropological minefield that needs more time to unpack for another day, so let's move on. Anyway, 34-year-old Crystal Denham was sentenced in circuit court in connection with last year's assault on Michael Barton, who police identified as Denham's cousin and neighbor in Corbin, which is a city 85 miles south of Lexington. Police were dispatched to Denham's home after she called 911 to report that she had stabbed Barton. When a cop arrived, Denham was sweeping the porch, and no, that isn't a euphemism. She was actually sweeping the porch. Denham told police that Barton had come to her home and they had gotten into an argument over a sex toy. Denham had borrowed the adult item and Barton wanted it back. After telling Barton to leave her property, Denham said he grabbed her by the elbow. Denham, police reported, said she then used the kitchen knife in her hand to stab him, but did not think she even drew blood. When police contacted Barton at his residence, he had 3 minor cuts to his arm, armpit, and back. Barton confirmed that the pair had gotten into an argument over the sex toy, adding that he went to leave when Denham began acting crazy. At that point, Denham stabbed him, said Barton, who declined EMS treatment. You know, I'm guessing that during her incarceration, she really misses that sex toy, but what I want to know is why, oh why, when you can readily find inexpensive sex toys online at Amazon, yeah, I checked. Would you need to get into a stabbing argument with your male cousin about one? One reason, and one reason only. You're an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0690. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestufffile.com, and once again, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0690. Email me at peter@thestufffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook and Twitter as PA Holder, and don't forget to check us out on patreon.com, where you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including KDXRadio.com, TrueTalkRadio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, MediaCore in Singapore, WLSLLP-FM in Dade City, Florida, Free 99 in Tyler, Texas, CKUW-FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been getting jiggy with Peter Anthony Holder and the Stuff File program, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. He's a bad mamma jamma. And after he spends some chill time in his crib, he'll be back to get down with his bad self. Word up.